Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this call that I am so looking forward to. It's just been a wonderful experience for me that we can share these moments in time, that we can be together, that we can celebrate each other and know that our life is a divine process. And it is a process of miracles and manifestation. And that is actually the theme of the call today, miracles and manifestation. And I have known the person we're going to be having a conversation with since the early 2000s, 2002, and known him over many, many years, not on an everyday basis, but on a period of time and then distance and period of time again. And it's just been a divine kind of thing to watch it unfold in miraculous ways. And so it's a beautiful thing to say hello to Johnny Thomas, beloved friend. And one of the things I want to say about my using this term, beloved friend, is that beloved has a very significant meaning. Actually, it goes back to the words of Jesus. You call me friend, I call you beloved. What it means is you see the essence, the soul, the beauty of the all that is. You're looking through the eyes of love. And what I realize is that when I call people beloved, sometimes they get nervous. They think it's some kind of a proposition. Sometimes they pull back, sometimes all kinds of interesting responses. And often, every now and then, I have to really define what, for me, the use of the word beloved means. So, my beloved friend, Johnny Thomas, and always known by John E., middle initial, Thomas, and other names. And we don't need to go into those, I don't think, Johnny, but welcome, Johnny. It's so wonderful having you on the call.
Well, thank you, Marge. It's so great to be here and great to see everyone. And really looking forward to this to share a little bit about my life experience and I love the topic, miracles and manifestations. Lots to say about that. So I'm really looking forward to today.
And one of the reasons that I see that so clearly in your life is because I've known you over many years and I've seen you move through different stages of your life. I didn't
Mm,
know you in the first stage of your life before you were 25 years old. And what I do know, and we won't go into this in depth, but there are pictures in the email that went out. Um, and what I want to do is show you or talk about. And the first two pictures are actually in that first childhood era of your
mm,
life.
mm,
And, what I realize is that pictures themselves are symbols, they
mm,
hold vibrations of energy.
mm.
And for those of you who printed out that email or didn't, you may want to go back and do that because you may want to look more closely at the pictures in the email you just got this morning. The first email, the first picture is in your early childhood. And as I look at it, Johnny, I see a sadness
Mm,
in your energy
mm,
field. Like, um, why is all of this happening?
yeah, yeah.
And of course, your human mind wasn't thinking that. You were just experiencing a difficult childhood.
Mm,
And that experience of a difficult childhood was leaving imprints, even when you weren't understanding it. It was before your conscious levels of understanding. And yet, a 6-year-old receives the imprints anyway, and it shows in that picture. In the second picture, it's you and your siblings, and there were 4 of you. You are the one sitting on the right-hand side on your
Hmm.
stepfather's knee.
Right.
And notice I said stepfather because your father had disappeared from your life. And that was maybe one of the whys you wondered about. And
Yes. What I would just say quickly is about those particular pictures in that early stage of my life. I have almost no memory of maybe before 9 or 10 years old. So even in those photos, I have no memory of that part of my childhood. And it is correct, I never knew my biological father. I eventually met him once when I was 17, but I never saw him again after that. And it was my stepfather who I grew up knowing and experiencing in the role of father. And I think those photos capture that uncertain child about what's going on here? Where am I? Who are these
you
people?
can see it in your
Yeah,
siblings also.
yeah, yeah,
The faces downcast, the
yeah.
uncertainty, the not knowing, the sadness. And those are imprints and symbols of the vibration you were experiencing. And going down to the next 2 pictures, they're actually in reverse order because there's a picture of you and your mother.
Mm,
Your
mm,
mother died in a moment of tragedy when she
mm-hmm,
was in her 50s.
mm-hmm. Yeah, she
And
was she was 54. And in that particular photo, I had by that time in my life, I had uh, broken away from our life experience in the small town in southern Indiana where we ended up early in life. I was in Memphis, Tennessee, and but it was a difficult life, and we were well, poverty stricken. It was very circumscribed and limited. But for some reason, I got out and I literally hitchhiked. Initially, I hitchhiked across country and moved into a yoga ashram in California, lived there for a while, came back, but then circled back again and began my journey in education. So that photo with my mom is during one of my visits back from college. And it was actually the last photo of her and I taken together. Yeah.
she's in her 50s and you are in your
20s. I'm probably
20s.
in my early slash mid 20s. I'm guessing around 24, 23, 24, something like that.
What I've noticed in my life, because I've gone through a lot of death and a lot of loss in my life, and there's been some difficult moments and challenges and things that I didn't know exactly how to feel and I didn't know exactly how to deal with. And yet, what I experience is what you're talking about. I have no memory of that.
Mm,
Gradually, those difficult moments dissolve. And I
mm,
think this is a divine dissolve.
mm,
It really feels like it is something that happens through grace.
mm,
And there's a healing that occurs through
mm,
this divine dissolve if we choose to focus on the positive and to focus on love, which I chose. And I think ultimately you chose. I'm not
yes.
sure you understood love at that point in time,
Well, there
because
was.
our understanding of love changes as we
Mm,
go through the different acts of our life.
mm. Yes, I guess in a nutshell, I would say each of those experiences for me were like springboards. And there was each is a challenge. I mean, when something like that happens initially, there's certainly an impact that occurs. But there's also always a choice. There's the old saying that many things in life we cannot control. Crazy things happen, but what we do have the opportunity to control is how we respond to those things.
Yes.
And ultimately, over time, and if you get unfortunate enough to get the experience of it multiple times, and moving through and having a period of somehow integrating and recovering, it builds a sense of confidence and capacity to encounter those things again. It doesn't mean that you don't feel the pain, but you do feel less suffering. And that's the transition or the transformation that becomes possible through that time.
For me, what has happened is that pain has turned into sadness. Sometimes a forerunner of that is disappointment, but the edge is taken off somehow.
Yes,
And
yes.
it feels like a divine gift when that edge is dissolved.
Well,
And
I feel like I had a sort of a mini self-imposed training slash preparation, if you will, that happened when I was living on the farm in southern Indiana, just before, really breaking away. At around the age 16, I was working for a farmer and their family that had moved in from California. And the farmer's wife, Janelle Koch, wonderful person, handed me two books, Autobiography of a Yogi and Ram Dass's Be Here Now. And so sitting in the woods in this remote farm, I just gobbled those books up and I taught myself to meditate. I began practicing yoga. I became a vegetarian at age 17 and have been my whole life. But that was my first sort of like aha awakening and opening up. And I just knew it awakened a sense of knowing in me that there's something incredible and wonderful that is beyond what this particular life experience is here right now. So when that first tragedy happened, I was interestingly able to navigate through that one a little bit better. By two and three and four, then I was starting to feel, I got knocked down a couple of times, but each time ultimately it became a form of how to say a springboard, an opportunity for growth and integration.
that's so beautiful. Were you at Unity in Tustin when Ram Dass actually came there?
I was not. That was just before I got there. Yeah. But I did see Ram Dass multiple times in the early days in Bloomington, Indiana, and a couple of different places. Saw him and Bhagawan Das, and yeah, that was really a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed literally hanging out with him. Pretty cool.
And then the picture of you receiving your diploma. Now, was this for your bachelor's degree or your master's?
No, this is the third degree. So my first was in electrical engineering at University of California, Santa Barbara, and my mother had passed just 6 weeks before graduation. And then fast forward a couple of years later, I ended up at Georgia Tech, also another electrical engineering, master's degree in electrical engineering. And then very fast forward now, another big gap, seems every 10 years or so, I went back, and this was Santa Clara University in Silicon Valley. And that's me getting the MBA. And I laugh when I see that photograph because I'm like, give me that degree. I'm reaching out for that thing. And it's like, yes, that's mine. I want that. And that was at a point where I began to transition from sort of project and program management and actual engineering work into executive role and ultimately VP and CEO and managing director and so forth. So yeah, that was around 2000. That was just before, actually just before coming to Unity of Tustin, because it was around that time I joined a startup company that sent me to Irvine prior to going to Europe, and that's when you and I met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a magical time that was for me and for you.
Yes.
And you sat in the service every single Sunday and just absorbed and
Yes.
absorbed and
Yes.
absorbed. And your wife, Joey, often helped in the Sunday school, and you had
Hmm.
three children, and they were little, and so imprints, always imprints happen.
Yes.
And one of the imprints were for you was one day I was talking and mentioned Ken Wilber's name, talking about stages of development and the evolution of consciousness. And you came and had a long conversation with me in the receiving line after that. And then you went over to the bookstore, which you often did, waiting for Joey to finish up with the
Hmm.
children, and started diving deeper in all of the books that were in that bookstore.
Yes. I often spent as much time in the bookstore after the service as the service was long. It was just a time when I was just voraciously reading and digging in and really cultivating my own personal practice and exploring. So I feel like I read, well, I know there's more, but it seemed like I read almost everything. And
And you dismissed Ken Wilber.
I did. When I first encountered Wilbur's work, I was like, this is everything I'm trying to get away from. I'm an engineer, I'm a scientist, I work in technology field. I'm wanting to get out of my head and into my heart. I want to feel. And Wilbur, my first impression was Wilbur was he was intellectualizing so much, and I was kind of like, no, no, please. And then, and you know this story. I'll tell a short piece. Like you mentioned, you suggested Ken, and I looked at that, and I looked at the website, and I just kind of went, thanks, but no thanks. And then I ended up taking an assignment that had me moving to Tampere, Finland, where I assumed the leadership role of a small company there as managing director of UNEV Microelectronics. And one day I met a philosophy professor at the University of Tampere, and he invited me to his house for lunch. And when I walked into his house, I'll never forget this. It was such an impression in the living room, from the floor to the ceiling, all four walls in the room were books. And I could look into one of the back bedrooms and I saw the same thing. And books from all the different fields of study and religion and science and poetry and philosophy and medicine. And so I was sitting there. He was an older gentleman, and it was a small room, not a huge room, but just overwhelming feeling of being surrounded by these books. And I couldn't help but ask him of all of these incredible books that you've studied, and you're so wise and you've learned so much. Is there one that impresses you the most? Is there something that is the most meaningful to you of all of these? And before I could even finish my comment, he stood up and wobbled over to the bookshelf and came back not with one, but a small stack of books by Ken Wilber. And they went, oh my gosh, okay, well, I guess I better take a look at these. So I ended up going home with all of those books and dug into them. And sure enough, it kind of captured my attention. And yeah, that began a whole new trajectory for me that eventually led me to Boulder, Colorado, not knowing anyone, eventually becoming executive director of the Integral Center in Boulder, and then eventually being an important part of my doctoral research when I returned for my PhD at Arizona State University. So I kind of
It's
jumped
so
through a bunch of
fascinating.
things there, but yeah, that was,
That first seed, the name Ken Wilber
yep,
that got planted at Unity
right,
of Austin that you rejected, now you were ready for.
yeah,
You were
yeah,
open to a new level and
yeah,
willing. And
yeah,
that willingness is something that is so important in our journey. Willingness.
yes,
All you need, of course, in Miracle says, is a little willingness. Not everyone has that willingness because they get stuck in their beliefs and they get stuck with where they are. And they think they've already made it. Well, I'm 85 years old, and
Mm.
I can tell you there's huge amounts I do not know. How do I know that? Because I've studied the realms of consciousness. Do I know about all of these higher realms? I've read about them. I haven't lived them yet.
Well,
But
I
I
would add
know
to that the ripeness and readiness, and neither one
that.
of which I was quite ready for in that initial introduction. But yet, it was, a genuine case of planting a seed that got nurtured and cared over time, and then it eventually sprouted into something, quite bold and strong. I went on to publish papers on Wilbur's work and integrating integral theory with engineering science, which is pretty radical to be talking about developmental psychology and integral in the College of Engineering. And now I have bits and pieces, sometimes very direct, sometimes less direct, but in virtually every course that I teach, I have some kind of a framework of the integral framework in relation to the particular topic that we're studying.
And my guess is that that's pretty rare still at a major university like the University of Colorado. This integration of Ken Wilber's work, the spectrum of consciousness, the map of consciousness into university courses. And you're
Yes,
also teaching a lot of courses for Coursera, which is an online course that can be
correct.
taught over and over and over again into
Right,
future time.
right.
That's that's one of my visions for the calls that we're doing now, that like this one, is that we're doing it for this now moment. It reflects our shifts in awareness as we begin to view the past moments of our life. And these calls are actually, for me,
Mm,
being recorded for future time.
mm. Yes, and in
Uh,
each one of those Coursera courses, the integral framework is there as well. And in every case, it isn't about, I don't bring per se the philosophy. It's not about adapting, let's say, the framework to the course. It's more like looking at the course and seeing how the framework fits. And then that becomes the adaptation. And in each case, it's a little bit different, but always making it relevant to the content of the course itself. And there's various ways and techniques of doing that.
and it becomes experiential.
Very experiential and very practical and applied. A little fancy description here, but I like rather than the integral map or framework, I think of as an epistemological compass, like a sense of orientation about different ways of knowing and perspectives and how to orient and guide and provide a holistic framework for or lens for overlaying various topics versus bringing a philosophy of a topic and trying to present that. It's always about, well, in entrepreneurship, we're talking about entrepreneurship, but human people are involved and how we perceive and interpret information and how we propose solutions is all influenced by our psychological disposition. So it's good to know who we are if we're going to really do a deep dive into these things. And this is a great tool for supporting that. So that's kind of how I approach these things.
What I had to find out before I understood totally who I am, and I don't even understand that experientially yet,
Yeah.
in the fourth act of
It's
my
a
life.
journey. Yeah.
Uh, but I had to learn something about the journey. And we've talked about the first act, and we've talked a little bit about the second act of your life. I consider the second act age 25 to 50. And we've talked about some of the endings in your life. We've talked about divine dissolve. We've talked about decisions that you had to make leaving Indiana, circling back, leaving again, ending up in Boulder. But in Boulder, you had what I call a glimpse or a vision. Now, in the email, I
Yeah.
forgot to change this when you told me it wasn't Flagstaff Mountain. You told me it was Gold Hill. Was that right?
No, Sugarloaf, Sugarloaf
Sugarloaf.
Mountain. And in fact, I can look out the window here beside my office, and it's just in the distance, right to the left. I have a view of that. But yeah, that is a very interesting time. And if you'd like, I'll give a brief overview of
Briefly.
that. Yeah. So when I first returned from Europe and came to Boulder and eventually was executive director of what was then called the Boulder Integral. Jeff Salzman and Ross Hostetter had formed the organization there. That was for a period of time, but no one knew me as the corporate executive. It was like a life I had elsewhere, and I just showed up, and I was just another Boulderite, there trying to figure out life. And it was a challenging time because I had become disillusioned with corporate life. I couldn't imagine going back into that world, and it was huge uncertainty about what to do and where to go. And after an extended period, I was here in Boulder for a number of years and deeply involved in the Integral Center and, gosh, every kind of practice and workshop. And you can imagine, as part of creating the Integral Incubator, ran that, several times with Ross Hostetter and just lots of different things. But I was still uncertain about what's next. What am I going to do? Who am I going to be? And I had just this incredible experience. I was living up on Sugarloaf Mountain, and one day I went for a hike up on the mountain, and from the top of Sugarloaf, it's a fabulous view over Boulder and the whole region. And I could look down and see the red tile roof of the university. And I've always, for some reason, always been drawn to education. It's just been such a big part of my life, partly because it was my way out. It was my way out of the life and scenario and situation that I had grown up in and found myself in. And I had a vision. I had a vision of myself as a professor at that university. And yet I had no reason to believe that, well, I didn't have a PhD, and I'd been out of, my last degree was 20 something years before. And for the last few years, I'd just been, in Boulder, doing Boulder things. But it was a very clear and strong and profound vision. And I grabbed a hold of it, and I charted a course. I colored in the vision, and I began a journey. And I said, I'm going to do that. So I spent just over 2 years of preparation just to apply for admission to a university.
The
And
graduate
then
record exam.
the graduate record exam, I created a whole process of training myself and all these training materials. I took probably 24 practice tests and just got myself conditioned and ready to go back to school. And then I started the interviewing process, ended up getting accepted at 2 different programs. I was very inspired by sustainability and the concept of resilience. And I had lost faith in traditional science and engineering, just at making widgets and selling things and making money. None of it seemed to bring any sense of satisfaction. But suddenly there was something that had a greater sense of purpose, that was bigger than me, and that I really felt a calling for. And it offered the opportunity to integrate all of my education and all of my experience, because I don't leave anything out. Anyone who's listened to Ken speak over the years, I imagine he every once in a while still does it. He used to start almost every conversation with the Big Bang. He would go all the way back and then work himself forward. But for me, it was always about finding a way to just include everything. And
Transcend
this
and include.
transcend and include. So I brought integral theory and developmental psychology into the study of resilience and sustainability in the College of Engineering, and managed to get a few publications out of that. And it was the center of my doctoral thesis. And yeah, the rest is history. Then I circled back, came back to Boulder, not knowing. There was this huge gap of not knowing, and that's when, I went to support you at the workshop in Southern California, and
So before we go there,
yeah,
let's kind of look again at some of the miracles and the miracle of you going into action. If we
yeah,
don't act on some of the things that are presented to us, if we discount them and don't believe them or whatever, that miracles don't happen.
yeah,
Something's gone wrong. But we have to say yes, we have to go into action, we have to apply. Here's a whole bunch of A's: apply ourselves. We
yeah,
have to accept and be accepted. And isn't it interesting that another A showed up, Arizona?
yeah, yes, yes,
Arizona State and Tempe. And that was actually where we first almost connected again in person, but
that's
not
right.
quite because I missed it.
Yes, I was on a Zoom call with Terry O'Fallon, and there you were, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's March. I haven't seen you in years, and we reached out and connected, and that was wonderful. A beginning of a new chapter, a new journey. One comment I wanted to make, and this is something that's come up for me, and I don't know, you may challenge me on this, but in a sense, I've come to sort of distinguish between miracle and manifestation. Miracle, in my experience, has become more when I'm less aware of my own capacity to manifest and create. And then the experience becomes this, miracle, this incredible thing. When I'm deeply in touch of my capability and my capacity to self-actualize, to self-direct, self-orient, and to manifest, it's experienced less of a miracle, of that miraculous and uncertain, somehow it just happens kind of thing, and becomes an awareness of a capability that's always been there, but that I not necessarily always in the field of my awareness. And as I practice and gain more confidence and more capability, setting these really big, hairy, audacious goals and accomplishing a couple here and there, it builds an awareness of that capacity. And the experience, on some level, I could call it miraculous, but it's not miraculous as in the sense of something happening that is completely outside the field of my capability to interact with it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I was thinking about that earlier today and realized it was a little bit of a distinction that's come up for me.
I take my definition of a miracle from A Course in Miracles. And one of the definitions there's 50 some definitions in the introduction. Miracles are not, miracles are natural.
Yeah, there you
When
go.
they are not happening, something has gone
Mm,
wrong or
mm,
awry. We've
mm,
missed something.
mm,
And so my missing your invitation to your doctoral dissertation was one of those misses.
mm.
I love learning from you, interestingly, Johnny. I have the extreme gift of having studied also, as you have, with Terry O'Fallon, and both of us having had her inventory. And she's told me many times, Marge, it's not a test. There are no wrong answers.
Yeah.
And what I'm aware of as a result of that is that you scored higher than I did. And I love that because that tells me there's something you can learn from this person. You know things that I don't yet understand or experience. And it
Mm,
makes me
mm,
extremely curious
mm,
and wanting to know more. So
mm.
that's just kind of my integration of the word miracle. But I love that now you're talking about resilience. And what you said to me as we were talking about pictures for this call, and I asked you if you wanted to go into any detail about the word tragedy relative to your mother's death. You said, you know, it's what I consider now the birth of resilience in
Mm,
my life.
mm, mm.
What a shift in perspective.
Yeah,
What a
yeah.
shift in perspective. And I loved that. I thought it was just so profound and so beautiful. But one of the other interesting things that we've brought a lot in about is what I call intersections in time. You
Mm,
mentioned Terry
mm,
O'Fallon. These
mm,
are points along the path. Uh, and you can call it the path of knowing yourself. You can call it the awareness. You can call it capital A awareness of small a awareness, as Terry O'Fallon does. You can call it many things. The soul's journey, because the soul's journey is different than the human journey. Although the soul is with you always, already. Notice the phrase from Ken Wilber again. I am
mm,
that, always, already. And you begin to recognize always that you're always already that, even while you're still learning. And everyone else is too. So it means everyone's right, but we have different levels of right view. And so it's really fascinating to me. Um, and then you mentioned the retreat, Love as Never Before retreat, where I was co-teaching with Terry O'Fallon and Kim Barta. And the miracle of that for me, and I think perhaps for you, because you hadn't actually taken Terry's inventory yet, but you had
That's
to in
right. Yeah.
order to assist, or she wouldn't let you in.
That's
And she
right.
says, if he'll take it, I'll score it myself. I call that a miracle. And um, and and I met another person that's been important in both of our lives there that you introduced me to, Tom Murray.
That's right. Yeah.
And I know Tom Murray was on the IONS conference, and today Tom Habib is on this call, and he was a facilitator of that conference.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled at that. You've mentioned Ross Hofstetter uh, two or three times. Ross Hofstadter today is involved in Humanities Team, where
Right.
Garth, our technical facilitator, is also involved. And actually, that's how we got acquainted with Garth. And these are all intersections in time. And
Mm,
Ross Hofstadter was involved in significant ways at Boulder Integral when you were there.
mm,
And Ross is now on the board of Called by Love
mm-hmm,
Institute.
mm-hmm,
Isn't this interesting how spirit keeps bringing together people who say yes, people who are willing, people who are part of being what I call God's plan, what others would call a higher plan, uh, uh, and answering that question over and over again in different ways. Um, what's next? What
yes. And
what questions are emerging? And one of the questions that was emerging, you had gotten your PhD from Arizona State, and you called me one day and said, "Can I come and sit on your couch? I need someone to talk to." You want to talk a little bit about that time?
yeah, and it kind of connects to something that you mentioned earlier, this sort of shift in perspective, which in a large sense, the reference to resilience encapsulates it, but it's even broader than that. And it ultimately, our time on the couch and the experience at the workshop became a shift in perspective. And while in many ways, to look out into the world, well, things are still what they are. They haven't necessarily changed. But what has changed is how I'm looking and what I'm able to perceive and to experience. And even reflecting back on how I ultimately have, and it's a process, it's not like it just happens and it's done, but perceiving and integrating my experience of my mother's death was to almost like even beyond transformation, a transmutation in the sense that there's a broader, deeper capacity to perceive a bigger picture with more meaning and depth than even I could imagine being capable of holding. And in that particular instance, and I've written about this, and one of the working titles at one point was From Grief to Gratitude, which holds a polarity almost not rational of how do you reason with these polarities? How do you get to gratitude from grief? And but it's really comes down to a point of how to say simple complexity in the sense that what one is grateful for, what I realized I was grateful for was not what happened, but what became of what happened that couldn't have happened any other way.
Yeah.
And this is similar even to the workshop and the time after finishing my graduate degree. There were times when it was huge uncertainty, just almost like not a, it just I couldn't see beyond. But there was somehow a capacity or a capability to allow for what I could not see. And you helped me remember that. And just that process of allowing opened the field of possibility where uh, holding too tightly to trying to frame or reference or identify had a way of circumscribing or limiting or constricting what might be possible. But when I was truly able to relax and allow, and in the words of Neil Donald Walsh, just acknowledge that there's something I don't know. What if there's something that I don't know, the knowing of which could change everything? And just to relax into that opened a field of possibility that ultimately, came around and bore fruit. And this is where I find myself more these days, where there is occasionally, I'll say that assertion of creating something or intentionally manifesting something. But more so, I find myself these days, life is almost like a playground. And I'm just like, wow, what's going to happen today? And just by relaxing into that openness and that sense of allowing, by not limiting around necessary, there's orientation and consideration on a practical level, but not like those early days where it was, it was like driving a train, climbing the mountain and so forth. Now it's like, wow, what's this? What's going to happen here? What might be possible? And so it's
Let
one
me
of my
pick up
favorite
on
words now. Allowing has become one of my favorite
let me
words.
pick up on your using climbing that mountain
Mm,
because I want to refer, I just loved this picture and chose
mm,
it to
mm,
be included And you'll
Yes.
notice I've made a note
Yes.
along the side, so
Yep.
I have to figure out how to get it in.
Yeah.
But to be included, this picture of you on the top of
Yep.
Long's Peak.
That's right. Yep.
And look at the way that you are holding up your hands, reaching to the sky. Now, you told me about the height of Long's Feet Peak. Uh, I actually added all of the numbers together. 4,250, I think it is. It all comes to eight. And
Uh-huh.
eight is the infinity loop.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
And, and you're standing there, and it's just amazing. You have lived a life of visions within visions. And when you were wondering what was next, sitting on my couch, one of the things I said to you was, "Oh, you can go to Thousand Palms and live in that home that I own there." And you didn't do that. It would have been a
Yeah.
miss. What you
Mm.
did was get in touch with friends, get in
Mm-hmm.
touch with people that were part of your magical life. I'm using that word with the awareness of the duality that can exist in it. And um, and one of them was Glenn.
That's
And
right.
Glenn
Yeah.
said, "Come and help me in my business." Now it
Yeah.
happened to do with being a stonemason and managing a business, and but he was losing an employee, and that employee had been living in one of the buildings he had, and he said, "You can have a place to live and you can have a job as you look for your next place."
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
That was a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you and Glenn had been to Burning Man and did different things
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So he was a person that was vision oriented, but he was on a different vision than you, and
Mm-hmm.
you knew it. But he offered a stepping stone. And then it was a couple of years later, probably, where you were looking for openings, always looking at openings in your field, and you saw an opening at the University of Colorado. Tell us about that.
Yes. To go back and connect that part with Glenn, actually, it was driving back from the workshop in Southern California, your
Love as
workshop
never
with you and
before.
Love as Never Before, when Glenn called. In fact, I think I even had the call while we were at the trailer. You and I went and stayed in Palm Springs, and that night it was when Glenn said, "Okay, yeah, I have a job here for you," and I had partly facilitated by our time together, but also just, my own process was dropping into a place of just being with what is and allowing things to unfold. And I was noticing that the anxiousness was dissolving, was sort of fading. And so yeah, Glenn had an opportunity. I've known Glenn from a men's group at Unity here in Boulder many years before, and just a dear friend. And yet, I mean, here it was a fairly menial task for someone but I was very grateful. And I just became sort of hyper aware of being sensitive to what's going on around me, what's showing up in my field. And while I wasn't anxious and looking and gotta find something, but I was paying attention. And across my desk comes this opportunity at the university, and it was like it was just written for me. The description was really perfect, and that from there things happened very quickly and fell into place. And now I'm going into my fifth year of teaching here at the university, and I also feel I thought maybe I've arrived, but I'm thinking there may be another mountain or two to climb yet.
I think there are.
But to put Long's Peak into perspective, that particular photo of me standing there was during a period of great uncertainty. And one of the ways that I dealt with that time in my life was intense physical exercise. So I used to bicycle all over the mountains here, and I set out to climb Long's Peak. That was a solo climb. I did it by myself, starting about 3:30 in the morning, and did that climb. Did it once again later with Glenn. But the interesting thing now is now I've come full circle, and the other photo at the bottom of the page there is a photo from the backyard of where I'm currently living, and actually I can see Long's Peak from the balcony, well, from the backyard and from the balcony of my bedroom. So to have come full circle to have this experience on the top of the mountain and now living in a place where I can behold that mountain just at a glance any time of day is pretty incredible, really remarkable.
And the lake house is also part of a dream you're exploring, because one of the things you've talked to me about multiple times is this dream of living in a conscious community. You don't
Correct.
know if you've solved it yet. Time will reveal it. But
Yes,
isn't this the way it is? Time
yes,
reveals it.
yes,
Timelessness within time. But the lake house is clearly a gorgeous home.
yes,
And it's the latest miracle of manifestation
yes,
that potentially taking you into the next unfolding. And these things, we have to say yes in interesting ways. And I find it fascinating that on this call today is Eric Hagan. And when
Eric,
doing um, Love as Never Before, and I called you and desperate for some
that's
help
right. Yeah,
because we had to transport people from the hotel to the Unity Church, and it was I had no idea how to do that. And you said, "Oh, I've done that lots of times. I know how to do that." And I said, "Come and help me. Come and take charge of it." And you said, "I can't afford that. I'm in between jobs now. I finished my degree. I don't have a job yet. I can't afford that." And I said, "You said I couldn't even afford the hotel room." And I said, "You can have my hotel room." And I called Eric and I said, "Can," and Eric said, "He can room with me." I
yeah,
mean, this is the way people help people. Hi,
yes.
Eric.
Hey. Oh, yes, I remember that, and that was is truly a wonderful experience. It's great to see you, Eric, and yeah, that was a fond memory of
Oh,
that
good. Same
time.
here.
Yeah.
And while you're putting other people on the screen, Garth, bring in Tom Habib, because Tom Habib is going to be our caller in 2 months. And Tom Habib is very, very significant in being a miracle in the integral path, and the person that pulled together the ions movement. Just mention that, Tom. You
Yeah, the ICON, Integral Conference of North America. It's I've got to run at 11 o'clock. I got a hard stop, but it's been fun listening to Johnny. And I think in another context, we could have been fast friends because our trajectory is so similar
Mm,
towards the
mm,
humbleness. And um, as wonderful as ICON was, when I think back at the mistakes, one of the biggest mistakes I did is reject Johnny's application speak
mm.
because before you had recommended him, Marj, um, I was just flying through applications. And I told him later the engineering scared me that it was going to be too pedantic. And so the more I listened to his biography, it's like, why wasn't there divine wake up, idiot? Uh,
It's perfect. This is the way how do we know it's perfect? Because it's happening.
Yes.
Because now you're connecting at a different level, which is even more authentic. And Tom Habib is going to be our spotlighted guest in August.
Mm,
And
mm.
so I'm thrilled to listen in on that, to have hope, Johnny, you can listen in on that.
Oh, absolutely.
Eric,
No,
I'd
and
love
I
to book
was
you for someone one of
and
these.
I was also happy to meet Tom recently at Steve McIntosh's house or gathering.
Yes,
That was really sweet. Yeah.
yes, that's right. You were there too. So it's really a circuitous path sometimes we're on, and
Mm,
we
mm,
don't know why things happen. But one of the things I had told Johnny is, God, when I was making those choices, I was just flying through
of
things because
course.
it had to be done.
Mm, mm,
And what I took personally out of it is not to personalize everything.
mm,
The complexity of it all is just incredible.
mm,
And we can't possibly know why.
mm,
Whereas I certainly personalize rejection like crazy still,
mm.
even though, the awareness of what Johnny said, we have choice of how we react and act. And boy, I still got room to do on that too. So I,
Well,
And
we all do. It's a continuous process, and we can make adjustments and change. In fact, I wanted to reflect briefly on the vision of the lake house, which began as a vision of an eco community. And I, for 2, 3 years, had been looking at property and thinking about development, and became disillusioned with what's possible and the interest rates, and just it just seemed to run away. But then I changed my way of thinking and recognize that, oh, well, yeah, this is kind of an experiment at this stage. And I don't necessarily need to own the property. Why not lease something and find something that's suitable, that gives me an opportunity to have the experience by
Mhm.
just changing my perspective of allowing it to come from another place and not needing to own it. And that's how I ultimately ended up finding the lake house, and now this big, beautiful house right on the lake, and private boat dock, an incredible view of the mountains and the whole Front Range, and am able to have that experience. And I don't have a mortgage. There's no interest and none of that. And the experiment is alive and well, and we'll see where it leads. But that was an example of it, just a change in my own perspective. I was resistant to get to it, but once I was allowed that shift, things opened up. And I think that is an enabler for what we might call miracles and manifestations, simply changing our intention, allowing for a different perspective that can still reveal and guide us and orient us toward our chosen experience, and just letting go of some preconceived notion of how it we imagine that it should look.
so I
Yeah,
want to go
I'll say
back to
just
that.
one thing that you've been impressing me with, Johnny. Is in my midnight sort of meanderings, I've kind of in my journalings come written down this phrase called um, contemplative co-arising
Mm,
as the way to kind of live life in the manifest world.
mm,
Is just being aware of, and contemplating life instead of thinking so much.
mm, mm.
So contemplative
I love that.
co-arising is
I
kind of
love
the
that.
the approach toward life, and that's kind of in a sense what you've been describing.
That's beautiful, Eric. Thank you.
And Tom, you too, with the how you respond to, looking at that stack of applications in that particular case, sort of seeing it as a contemplative co-arising with the energies, or however you con conceptualize any of this. Mhm.
So Eric is an architect and heading up a huge area at UCLA in California. And so, Eric, I'll be back in touch with you. We were prayer partners for what, 2 or 3 years,
At
meeting
least, yeah.
once a week online. And it's so amazing. Um, so we'll say goodbye to Tom. He
Bye,
said he's
Tom.
to
It's great to
go.
see you again.
And I want to go back to that theme idea, Johnny. And it's one of the reasons that I am doing these calls. I want for myself in this fourth act of my life, um, I don't think anyone else on our team or uh, in my circle of friends right now is in their fourth act of life
Mm,
that is involved in Called by Love in the way that I am. But I want to begin to bring in astrology. So I wanted
mm,
to
mm.
share with you what the cosmos looks like, how the transits are working. I just wanted to share with you, and then we're going to be going to letting other people share. And uh, during the call today, there is an out of bounds moon that is entering the planet of Sagittarius, which happens to be Johnny's birth sign.
That's right. Yeah. Interesting.
And this out of bounds moon enters fiery, creative, changeable, visionary Sagittarius. And the
Mm.
theme during this period of time, according to Anne Ortley, who's I also want to bring on the call at some point in time, maybe next year, is climb every mountain. And while you're doing it, to communicate carefully, but you have to take a risk.
Mm. This is true. Yes.
And we are at the 1 o'clock hour in Kansas City and have only about a little less than 30 minutes left. And I want to begin to invite other people to share any of the things that they heard that you said, oh my God, that's happened to me. Or I have never thought about it that way
Mm.
because it's a new way that I can see my own life. And so it's not as much about asking Johnny questions about his life, although you could do that, but it's more about recognizing we are all one and we're here in the game, playing together and learning from each other, not judging each other, not criticizing each other, not uh, feeling like we're better than, but rather simply learning. And as I invite whoever would like to share any perspectives like that to raise their hands. And I will share with you that one of the people who has been a regular attendee on the call sent me an email and told me about a serious illness that she's been diagnosed with. And I won't share her name because I don't have her permission to share. But let's just hold in our hearts and in our awareness that vibration of healing and embracing everyone on this call, and especially that one caller that let me know that she would be on the call if she could, but probably couldn't speak, and why. And just know that I'm holding you in my love. I'm holding you in the highest level of healing and invoking the Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Come upon her, come upon us. Reveal yourself in all of the ways of healing. So many ways of healing. And so it is. And do we have anyone who would like to share? Do I see any hands? Don't see any hands.
Celia has her hand up.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing that. Cecilia.
Hello. So, what I'm getting from this talk, and thank you, Johnny, for all that you've shared, is just
Mm.
how we're all on our own path, but we're all coming like to the information, the intuition, the intelligence that we need to navigate.
Mm,
So my path is the red road. Um, I'm I'm Mexican, but part of that is I'm Yaqui. My great grandmothers were Yaqui women, and in the mid 1800s, a lot of Europeans came in, and that's kind of the family line. But my path has been ceremony in the Lakota tradition.
mm,
I've done talking circles, sweat lodges, vision quests, and that's been how I've healed the trauma that I experienced.
mm,
And it's
beautiful.
been what I find from my time with Marj, which when I got to Unity at Tustin, he was pastor emeritus, but I would go to the Call by Love in-person gatherings. I got a lot of language and
Mm,
words in English to describe what I was navigating.
mm,
And so that's what this call has been for me today, is as I'm listening to you share your story and your dialogue, the dialogue between Marj and Johnny, like, oh, here's more words, here's more descriptions of what I've traveled.
mm,
And so it's with great gratitude. And no one path fits mine. It's like I've pulled from so many different directions,
mm,
because I'll just say it, my first language is Spanish. So that's just like, how do I describe what I'm going through? And it's really not for anyone else. It's just more like, how do I dialogue within myself of what I've experienced, and the healing, and what I've gained,
mm,
and the person I've become, the love that I feel, that I emanate.
mm,
It's all been just so serendipitous. It's been such a joy in the end. I've had to process a lot. Um, and it's it's inspiring for me. Like, it's like how I'm like, keep going, and I've become my own biggest cheerleader.
mm. That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Cecilia. Yeah, that
So
it as you were speaking, it just reminded me of we've been using the sort of the metaphor of climbing the mountain a couple of
yes,
different ways today, and there are so many different ways to climb the mountain. There are many
yes,
different trails, and we could maybe drill a hole and we could come in from a helicopter. We could, the north, the south, the east, and appreciating all of those different methodologies and ways and perspectives and words and languages that ultimately to share in moments like this enrich our individual and collective experiences. And
hmm
that's the beautiful thing about this type of experience, or this satsang, this way of expressing.
yeah. And for me, that's something that I thought of as you're speaking of mountains. My last name is Bas. It's Mendivil. And Mendivil translates from Euskadi to Spanish as doble montaña, like a double mountain. Or it's
Ah,
also been described as of the mountain town. So
mm,
that's always been an inspiration for me. I
mm.
literally came in with it. So thank you.
Wow, that's beautiful. Wow,
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
hmm
Anyone else like to share?
Well, I'll share something briefly that came up for me as we were thinking, sort of bubbling up in the background around the reference to miracle and manifestation and self-actualization. And it is maybe an extension of this notion of allowing, and that is choice. And the power of choice when we truly recognize the capacity and the resource that we have, each and every one of us have access to what may, from one perspective, be viewed as a miracle, is actually a recognition of our authentic, original essence, of our genuine capability to choose and participate in our life experience. And that, to me, is incredibly empowering and uplifting to recognize that. It's sort of the gradual shift that, in early stages, is perceived as a need and then becoming a want and eventually becoming a desire, that shifting from need or want into just authentic form of desire, but then orienting that desire and activating it through a process of choice and self-empowerment and self-activation. And that then reveals the manifestation. It creates the condition for the manifestation to reveal itself.
One of the interesting things in my shift from California to moving back to Kansas City, which is the world headquarters, the beginning of the Unity movement, is I attend the church, Unity on the Plaza, where I attended when I was in my late 30s. And it was one of my beginnings in Unity. And then I became a Unity minister and went out into the field and ended up spending over 30 years in California. And yet, here I am back in Kansas City. And so there's often this kind of circling that you talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
We sometimes circle back, and there are beginnings in our lives, and there are birthing experiences in our lives. Really, really important, the birthing experiences, all of the different things we do in the different stages of our lives, 0 to 25, first act, 25 to 50, second act, 50 to 75, third act. You're still in your third act, Johnny.
I am. And
There's a whole lot of life ahead of you. 75 to 100. I'm in my fourth act. There's still a whole lot of life ahead of me. Now, will I, at some point in time, go through the veils? Obviously, that is one of the potentials. What I've learned in the third act of my life, when I did extensive study with one of the people who is one of the outstanding mediums, Suzanne Giesman. She's very actively involved in humanities team, which Garth is part of, and Ross is now part of. And, we are interrelating. We are connectors in these moments in time. I think one of the ways that I'm an important connector is with people who understand and know Unity. Interestingly, Garth is a webmaster and in charge of technology, not only for us, but also for a Unity church in Salem, Oregon. I've never met Garth, and yet here he is, a really significant part of our team. And I see Ed holding up his hand, his finger, thumbs up. Really been an important person as we've had to recreate our website. We're still in process on that. What are you recreating in your life, perhaps, at some point in time that you're calling the now moment? Recognizing there's just a moment in time that's part of a larger now that is part of timelessness. And what will you be creating? What will you be recreating? What will what are the endings and the beginnings? What's the letting go? Marla told me something on a call yesterday. She's about it, how she changes the words let go and let God. Do you want to come on, Marla, and say how you change them and why? If you do, raise your hand. All right, Marla. Talk to us about how you change those words and why.
Oh, I learned it from your husband, Paul Timon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, he's the one that told me that. He said, let God and let go. So it probably is just the easier, softer way to do it reversed that way. Yeah, Paul Timon, your ex-husband that's passed away, he's the one that told me about that. Yep. Thank you.
Marla, I'm so glad that you shared that. That's beautiful. And how do we view the people in our lives that are part of our past that perhaps have passed away? And is it through the eyes of love? Those are shifts that we are still in charge of. Do we see through the eyes that are critical and judgmental? Do we see through the eyes of disappointments or difficult moments? Or do we see through the eyes of the good and the true and the beautiful? And what I realize constantly is we're dancing all of the colors of the rainbow, all of the way from the reds and then the oranges and the yellows and the greens and and then going up into the blues and the purples and the whites. And uh, it, it, are we aware that we're ascending the rainbow and the top of the rainbow, that may be your top of the rainbow, actually then descends and comes back to dance with others in the rainbow that are still in the process? And Marjorie,
Hello. Yeah,
hi.
I'm happy to be here. I got your email to join this call. I'm sorry I came in so late. I was on another call, but I didn't want to miss this. And I know you, Marj, from through Terry Patton. I'm a member of the New Republic of the Heart, the intentional community that he founded. And I also know you through Integral Circles and also New Thought. I'm a Science of Mind practitioner, not a licensed practitioner, but I am a Science of Mind practitioner. And so I think we have a lot in common. So I appreciate the topic today about miracles. And there is a way of, there's several ways of looking at that word, but I feel like, to me, to get it away from that either or, like everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle, I kind of think it's both, you know. And same way I feel like about the words extraordinary and ordinary. You know, I think that in a way you could look at life as everything is extraordinary or everything is ordinary or some combination thereof, you know, some kind of both and thing going on there. But yeah, both and always. And yet sometimes there is times when we zone in on a particular either or. Like, for example, if I'm very passionate about a certain topic or a certain issue or a certain and especially when you start getting into politics and things like that, I can be extremely one-sided, you know, on that, and speak clearly. And then but I'm coming from a higher place of understanding that actually both sides are happening, you know. And so I mean it's just very paradoxical. Things are paradoxical to me in my world these days, and just embracing that understanding of life and death, love and joy, peace and discord. All of these seeming polarities are actually two sides of one thing. It's all love, you know.
This
Beautiful,
is what
Marjorie.
gives me hope.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hope. That's another word that some people have in the New Thought movement. For many years there, it was like, no, we don't use that word hope or something. I'm like, wait a minute, you know. So, because I love the word hope and I embrace that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah.
I'm appreciating your comments, Marjorie, and recognizing that how our experience shifts and changes with our perspectives. And as we continue to expand and deepen our perspectives, it enriches, has the opportunity to enrich our experience. And something you were describing, Marge, sort of the full cycle of your life, going out into California and then coming now the full circle back to Kansas City, it reminded me of Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. And in a sense, that has a dimensional sort of perspective to it, and there's a very practical of the worldly experience of the hero's journey, going out into the world and coming back. But there's also a more cosmic or deeper sort of spiritual interpretation of the hero's journey of our own, representing our own awakening and remembering the essence of our true nature and coming home to that place. And that's a beautiful thing. So I just love that you referenced that, and it sort of came up as I was listening to Marjorie speaking as well. Like as our perspectives evolve, that our coming home to our true essence, opening up to a broader and deeper experience of our essential self. It's a beautiful thing.
And I think about Thomas Hubel, who one time said something I've never forgotten. He said, "You climb to the top of the mountain, and when you get to the top, you look out over the mountain range and realize there are lots of tops of the mountains."
Yes.
And they all have different
Yes.
tops. And I'm remembering a time that Fabian and I were driving through the desert, and we were going from the home in Thousand Palms to a sound festival, or an experience. Experience is the right word. And it had been raining. And so we were driving through, and everywhere we looked, there were rainbows. Multiple. I've never seen anything like it except in that moment. Multiple rainbows. We all live in our own rainbow, and everyone that is in the world has their own rainbow. And there's a top of the rainbow that is different from the top of the rainbow for everyone else. My word is clearly love. One of Johnny's key words is resilience. We have different key words to describe our tops of the rainbow and our points of awakening. And it's so amazing. And moments in time, you brought up Terry Patton's name, and I will never forget one of the days that we were doing a worldwide call, and I had the screen onto full view, gallery view, and all of a sudden, Terry Patton popped in. And he did just like you have done, Marjorie. You had something else going on and you came in at a later moment in time. And there was Terry Patton. And I said, "Oh my God, Terry, I'm so glad to see you." And we had an amazing dialogue. And he had been diagnosed with a terminal disease. And I said, "Terry, I have no idea whether you will go through the veils first or I will go through the veils, because I'm older than you are." And so, but Terry, what I would love to have from you is a commitment. If I go through first, I will do everything I can to support you on the other side. If you go through first, I want you to do everything you can to support my work on this side. And he gave me a thumbs up.
Oh, well,
And
And
I
you can
took
be
a,
sure that he's on the other side right now listening to us.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
And I took a
exactly.
picture of that thumbs up, actually from the recording, and it became one of my treasures. Thumbs up.
Beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
Ed did a thumbs up just a minute ago when Eric came on. And, it's amazing how we are connectors for each other.
Mm.
We are part of the journey, the soul journey of each other in the ascending path and in the descending path. It's not about anybody ever being right or wrong or knowing it better or doing it better than somebody else. It's just different moments in time, different perceptions in time. And somehow they're intersecting for us to learn something new. Maybe it's part of our destiny path. And so I look at that now, even in my mid 80s, and realize that I'm not done yet. And if I die tomorrow, I will say, I'm not done yet, even though I'll be in the invisible. And now I know how that works because of the studies that I've done with Suzanne Giesman. Uh, we don't leave this human plane. We don't leave this existence. We just change forms from the visible to the invisible. Now, does everyone believe that? Nope. There are people like you were the first time you heard about Ken Wilbert that said, not for me, Johnny.
Well, we can also just frame that in science, and this is, I think, a beautiful example of where science and spirituality comes together, where Albert Einstein reminded us that energy is neither created or destroyed, it merely changes form. And what changes with that form is our perspective. And that's a part of the trajectory of our growth and our evolutionary development is that ever expanding perspective. So I love that you framed that way, Marge.
And that may be a beautiful place to begin to close. I am so thrilled that all of you were here on this call today. It's been such a gift, Johnny, to have you as a spotlighted guest. I dearly love you. And it's amazing to see how our lives have come back together after
Yes.
that early connection over 20 years ago.
Yes. Oh,
And that's happening with me now with Ed coming back together after an earlier connection 50 years ago. You never know where your lives will come, how your lives will come back together. And it's a great gift. Thank you, thank you,
well,
thank you,
thank
Johnny.
you so much, Marge. I so appreciate you inviting me, and I do love you and care for you so much. And you've been such an important part of my growth and my experience in my life over the years. And thank you for everyone for your participation and your presence. It's great to see you, Eric, again, especially, and I loved hearing from Cecilia and others. Great to see you, Ed, again. And I'm really grateful for your work, Marge, and you're continuing to bring people together and have these important conversations.
Well, I want to express one final gratitude to Garth because if it weren't for Garth, we would not be doing this at nearly the technical level that we are now. So, Garth, wave a hello.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Garth.
as we're in gallery view, just take a moment to see every face and take a moment to know love. Take a moment to know blessing. Take a moment to know healing. Take a moment to know heaven on earth. Take a moment to realize we are one. I am that. You are that. And we are that. And so it is. And we'll see you next month. And our guest next month is going to be another beloved soul, a Unity minister. And I'm going to tell you more about her in emails to come. And I'm so looking forward to that call. Much love and many,
Thank
many
you.
blessings.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Cheers.
you.